Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to introduce the next speaker of the day for the last session. It's Professor Daniele Marinazzo. He's a professor at the Data Analysis Department in the Faculty of Psychology and Educational Sciences at Ghent University. Today he will talk about current and future scenarios for open scientific publishing and reviewing in a bit of a discussion format.
Okay, thanks, Sophie, and thanks all the others for this very nice organization. I'm really impressed. And yeah, unfortunately, I'll be here only a few hours, but I'm sure you will have a great time. This year, at least, I have some slides on a few of them, but it's just, I mean, the important thing is that we discuss how we can fix this mess we got ourselves into, and to see if someone has idea. Especially, I mean, generally the thing is that everyone agrees that it's a disaster, but then when it comes, and also people agrees on what the solution would be, but then we don't do things. So yeah, I don't know. Let's see. A brief introduction for, I don't know, many things you will know them already, or at least you will have experienced them. Let's start with this recent tweet from last week. So it was this guy who asked to explain academic publishing like is 5. And so there were some nice answers. So imagine designing, building, and paying for a new theme park. A stranger tests the rides, removes the face-painting clown, but adds a roller coaster, delaying opening by 6 months. The park opens, but Disneyland charges admission, and neither you nor the stranger get paid. Okay, this one. I'm sure you can relate. This one, well, I will not read them all, but they are fun. This is one of the favorite ones. This is French, I'm sorry, but it was also nice. I may translate this one. So you should convince your classmates that you made a nice painting so that you can put it on the wall. And so the classroom will be more beautiful after that. And if they agree, then the teacher will stitch it to the wall and will take your lunchbox as a salary. Okay. Ice cream, sandwich. So, I mean, I'm sure you can relate to some of this. And there were so many more answers, a bit, some of them hilarious, some of them depressing. Anyway, it's about publishing and it's about reviewing. So it's about how we evaluate the work that we do, how we want our work to be communicated, and what does it cost to us in terms of time and in terms of money. So you did all the homework right. You have your open science stuff, GitHub, Docker, automated pipelines, etc. And then you put this thing on a preprint server, so everyone can read it after your work has passed the hopefully high bar that we set to ourselves. And then you have many platforms to make your work transparent, interoperable, user control, source neutral. So this is called the information system supporting research. Who made this slide? Elsevier. And why? All those things typically are all implemented by academics at the beginning, but then they are acquired by Elsevier. This is a kind of almost 1 year old. I'm pretty much sure that a few of those things are also being acquired by Elsevier. or by someone else evil. I mean, one of the issues with Elsevier that is so bad that then we conflate all the bad there. It's not only that. Unfortunately, GitHub starting collaborating with ICE in the United States to screw immigrants' life even more, and so on. But anyway, let's stick to the Elsevier part. It's already depressing enough. Okay, so paywalls then are not the sole problem. It's not just that we have to pay. You say, oh, okay, we have open access, my founder pays for it, everyone can read it, and so on. But of course, we have seen auto processing charges increasing a lot during the last years. So for example, Frontiers increased 1 year from 2007 to 2018, 40%. These are percentage change in subscription prices, so it might seem linear, but it's a percent change, so it's a lot. And also, this is the inflation, and this is the amount of journal purchased by universities. This is another graph on APCs in US and EU, and the open ones also increased a lot. So the problem is that open access deals will hopefully probably make things worse. So because now, as scientists, we are really bad economic machines, and we want to pay a lot for nothing or for the same service. This, you can see it for here. We give now to auto processing charges the status of a proxy for the impact factor, which in turn we give the proxy of quality of our work. That's how stupid we are. Even more, two identical outlets, identical in terms of scope and journals, PLOS ONE and scientific reports, two identical in scope mega journals. Scientific reports is costs more money. It has a Nature brand, and so what happened? This one grows, and the other one drops because it costs more. And so people say, "Oh no, scientific report must be better because it costs more." So there is not even economic theory which saves us. It's not say, okay, the demand, supply, whatever, we all want to publish good stuff for a tiny amount of money, eventually we'll manage it. No. We do the opposite. There is this nice Guardian piece which shows how basically publishers, which on the other hand are very good economic actors, were able to revert also all the predictions which were made at the start of the massive internet age. We say, well, okay, now everything will be on the internet. Who will need legacy publishers anymore? And here they are. So, what's the goal? To have your science accessible. So there are some websites like this one in which you can represent in a diagram cost and influence of articles with different metrics, which is not only the impact factor. Actually, some of the most influential articles, according to these metrics, are also in free journals. So not necessarily the impact factor and the APC correlation that we saw before is meaningful of anything, if ever we need it. And also, you might already have the open access deal solved without paying a lot of money to the publishers. Indeed, several EU member states, and a growing number of them, have some internal laws which bypass copyright. So even if you transferred your copyright to the journals, which is already a bad thing, but okay, it's done. Anyway, in Belgium, after 6 months, you can overrule this. So you can publish on your institutional repository the version there. So it's not, you say, okay, I want to publish, I need to pay this money because then otherwise my research will not be open access. It's not true. So what's the right cost to publish? So there have been some examples. This is a study by Grossman, which was a former editor, and Björn Brems. They have some numbers. The paper has a lot of links, Excel files with data together, and so. This is roughly the bottom line, which states that the cost is on order of a few €100. So why the things differ? Of course, they depend on the type of platform that you have, the number of submissions that you receive, because, of course, if you receive a lot of submissions, you have to process a lot of them. You have to invite reviewers. You have to store reviews, and so it's time consuming, and so the price also goes up. But anyway, there's really at least one order of magnitude less than what we are expected to pay in hybrid and golden open access journals. There is also this blog by Michael Breckspear, who is an editor at New Image, which is an Elsevier journal. On the other hand, Michael per se is a quite open-minded guy, so he tried to make this comprehensive overview on all the different types of open access. Actually, the figure itself is taken by one overlay journal, which I will briefly introduce you later. So, yeah, it's basically free for authors, free for readers. Authors retain copyright, peer-reviewed, and intersections of all of this. So, Michael's analysis is a bit more skewed towards the publisher sites. It has some debatable points like, yeah, but journals can help in resolving editorial controversies or so. But anyway, some maybe are, but not all of them, because sometimes they make the editorial content. So what do legacy journals do to justify charges? So in that blog by Michael, they link to Scholarly Kitchen, which is basically the publisher social media outlet, in which they have collected more than 100 reasons why they should exist. Some of them are really good reasons. It's not clear that they should cost that much or that they should then invest in weapons or whatever. But anyway, these are some good reasons and some things, some suggestions that we can take ourselves if we want to really own the thing. On the other hand, the main things that journals do to justify charges is rejecting papers. And this is the estimated acceptance rate, and this is the APC charges. Now, this is money, we're talking about money. On the other hand, it's not just money, it's time. It's the author's time, it's the reviewer's time, it's the reader's time. Because now, with the current state of things, you submit to a journal, you get reviewed, you get rejected, and then the reviews are gone. Sometimes also the authors are guilty of this. Sometimes the authors themselves, they just resubmit the papers as it is somewhere else, and they don't treasure the reviews. But anyway, it's a huge waste of money and a huge waste of time. So what do we need apart from keep paying more money to the publishers to basically buy our tools and publish our work? This infrastructure should contain pre-registrations, data, metadata, the preprint itself, and then comments on preprint, formal reviews, and so, and then eventually the final product. Who pays for it? Now, at the moment, there are a few for the existing free or at least fair infrastructures that we have. There are some foundations and some academic institutions, but of course, all the money which we now throw into subscriptions could be recycled in there. So they say, well, okay, we need personnel. What would happen to the poor librarians or so? All those people could and should work for this. And an important thing is that the mandates, like you have to publish open access or whatever, should go to the institutions, should go to the founders themselves. They should not go to the individuals. Because otherwise, the APCs will just keep on rising. And you say, well, I publish open access, but you are basically paying a lot for something that you have already. So one can say, okay, this infrastructure could become a huge dump of our research output, which is nice, but is less nice if it's not organized. And journals also are important for community bonding purposes, for promoting good work, because, of course, I mean, with 200, 300 papers which come out each day, then eventually you should see which one eventually I should at least prioritize or invest students' time on. So these are hopefully the characteristics which journals should keep in this scenario. This is a sketch of one possible implementation of this infrastructure. So you have the layer of community, academics, which maintain this platform themselves in terms of putting material on it and so, and also editing and reviewing. Then you have the layer of the product, data, software, preprints, and then academic journals, which would still exist in terms of groups of people working on the same thing and valuing the same thing. Policy journals to educate decision makers, and transfer journals for society at large to speak to stakeholders and so on. And then the layer of infrastructure, libraries and repositories. Now, some examples of these community-driven journals. So there is the OHBM platform, which has now started as a concept. There is people working on it. There is Kirsty and other people involved in it. They're still not started with the submissions. They are still not clear which kind of submission they will accept, but hopefully it will be anything from the data to the pipeline. Data will be more living pipelines or whatever. Then we have this recent machine learning for biomedical imaging. And then a journal I'm involved in, which is this neurons behavior, data analysis, and theory, which these two are overlay journals. So basically, the papers live on the archive. Then editors are invited by the authors to handle their papers. In the case of MBDT, the sole criteria for acceptance is, would I, as an editor, do eventually a journal club on that paper? Yes, not? I mean, I don't do journal clubs, so maybe I should reject all the papers, but I mean, some internal journal club, let's say. So this is the concept, basically. And then the reviews are public. So what keeps us from change? It's seriously depressing. So everyone agrees on this issues, and still we are here. I don't know, personally. I mean, I try to be involved with many journals. I try to change things from inside or so, but also I'm also stuck in this horrible molasses with the four cornered wheels and so. I don't know why is that. So we should talk and we should see how we can get out of this mess. I'm trying not to curse. I manage. So we can maybe go back to the tweets about academic publishing explained to a 5-year-old, and we can talk between us how we can change this. One thing I can start with, when we launched the journal, MBDT, we did a kind of a survey on Twitter saying what is the main reason why you would not publish on the journal. And the main thing was lack of status and the lack of recognition. Say, if I publish here, maybe my work will be wasted because someone say, okay, it's basically a preprint with a couple of reviews, but a journal which is not accepted, my university won't accept it, my doctoral committee won't accept it, my grant committee won't accept it, and so on. Things are slowly changing. Let's say in the last years, I don't know, at least in Belgium, FWO stopped after a long time asking for impact factor of the journal. Still it's optional, but they say, well, okay, you can omit if you want the impact factor of the journal you published in. And so other committees about for selecting faculty or so, they don't turn the back of preprints, reviews, and stuff. On the other hand, still one way or another, we end up in the legacy journals. And what can we do? Ideas?
Well, I don't understand. Why do we end up in the legacy journals?
Neither I do. You tell me.
Isn't it your decision as an author to where to submit? Like, if you don't want to submit,
Yes, it is. Sure.
then why don't you do it?
Good question. I don't know.
I think scientists are victims of heavy lobbying. You are probably also aware of this, that there was also like a signed statement of several American societies saying that open access might be a harm for copyrights of American knowledge, something like that. I don't know the exact wording. And there are also several American scientific societies signing that letter. And so the problem is not only within the publishers, but also within the societies themselves, which are based on ourselves.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's even more worrying that our societies we should represent us and should be made by us. So, I mean, hopefully, well, OHBM is not a society per se, but anyway, it's comparable in some aspect to society, and hopefully is going in a better direction. But yeah, the problem is that sometimes societies, both in terms of the journals run by societies and by the individuals within, do bad choices. I mean, we can see also in the daily politics or whatever. It's we make bad choices as individuals. Yes.
So, as the impact factor correlates with the price of submission, it might be a tool to be less inclusive and to prevent that all scientists might have the same chances, and so that some people stay in power. Because probably mostly white people publish in those expensive journals, not everyone. And also big scientific groups, not smaller scientific groups. So it's
very well explained in the Guardian piece, Eric, which you say, well, how come that publishers then at the beginning start to first build monopolies and and maintain them on the basis, of course, of privilege, of course, and say, well, okay, it's a status.
What's the question again?
Why?
We're not trained to answer why questions.
So maybe because they're just too new and it takes some time to get like a status themselves. Maybe that's why.
Okay. I mean, the archive has existed since a long time or so, and journals. I mean, with the advent of internet, we could have gotten rid of journals like that. We didn't. Yeah.
So how do you judge a scientist by just reading the journal or just the title of the?
Yeah, no, that's why I say that.
No, but
oh, sorry.
What I'm hinting at is, I think people inherently look for a way to rank and judge people and put them in order because resources are limited. I mean, I'm not defending impact factors here. No, really, they're terrible. But some kind of metric, I think people need to do this.
Yeah, of course. So that's why I say that journals should keep existing. So journals made of people who read similar things. So you say, I don't know, you do the journal of convolution of neural data. So you say, well, okay, Benedict has this nice toolbox. Let's try it on. It's shitty. And then I stop citing it or using it or so, and vice versa. So it really needs to go in that direction. And so also in this case, we should have a system of living and continuous review. So that's why I will briefly later maybe introduce a couple of these existing platforms. One is Pablons and the other one is Papier, in which you can organize your own overlay journals, your own reviews, and especially continuing reviewing papers. I mean, it can be papers, can be GitHub repositories. Is in the same way. I mean, if I'm looking for a toolbox to do something, I rather go to a repository which has I don't know, a community of 6 or 7 very engaged developers, a diverse community of users, a lot of issues and that and so, rather than I don't know, a dump of MATLAB files by a fancy group. Then it depends.
I was going to build off of the two-back point about the fact that new initiatives need time. So there's like there's a critical mass kind of problem, and so because it takes time for people to adopt new ideas or have sort of brand recognition for different journals, that's one of the reasons why they die. So there's like a sort of solidarity kind of aspect of we are more powerful if we all stand together. But also one of the big things that I have a big bee in my bonnet about at the moment is the funders keep choosing the people who have the strongest survivor bias to judge who's good enough to get the next round of grants or the next fellowships and things like that. So one of my big asks that I'm like projecting to anyone that will listen is for all funding and selection panels to have 2 early career researchers on, because I think then you'll start to get people in the room who are saying, oh, you know, actually you don't need to only publish in those sorts of spaces. So there's a sort of, like, I'm trying to think about kind of, I think it's hard to have movements, it's hard to have culture change. And so angles that sort of empower the masses is really powerful.
Sorry, can I once more elaborate on the point? Because I think it's a different one. I think we are in a big, how's it called? Prison's dilemma here. That journals like NBDT, they don't reach this thing of this is a good paper, this is a bad paper, this is a valuable paper or not paper. If you just have a minute to read through the list or something, I don't know how people judge other people, but that's how I imagine it is. Very short time, hundreds of people applying for positions on these kind of things, and so it's a prisoner dilemma because I, for myself, like I like the idea of NBDT. I still didn't publish there, I chose another obscure journal, but it's a little bit less obscure than, or not obscure, but unknown or unprestigious or whatever that means. But that's how I judge the system, because I don't want to completely lose by changing. I don't like. Everybody would need to change at the same time. Then it would work. So in order to explain the why, I think this is one. I would say this is one aspect. It's a prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, even in the case of journals and in the case of impact factors, the relationship between the quality, or even not the quality, because of course it is something more difficult to assess, but even the number of citations of a single paper, I mean, the distribution is so very skewed that, I mean, you can see some statistics on, for example, of course, a paper published in Nature will receive much more publicity than it can be good publicity, but publicity, luckily, we are bad economic machines, but we are not completely stupid in evaluating then research, and so we can read the papers. Okay, this one is good, this one is better. So, but also there, I mean, you can say, okay, this paper is terrible, but then after 1 week, people stop talking about how terrible the paper is, and then you move to another paper which is very good or very bad. So, I think that if you publish in a fancy journal, you will have maybe, I don't know, 3 days of glory, and then you have, I mean, glory in the sense of resonance. And then you will have a label which some panels will consider you higher on that. But on the other hand, in the case of more obscure journals, hopefully we can, on one hand, try to suppress this spiked and skewed effect of attentions, and on the other hand, we can try to promote. That's why it's important to have an infrastructure, not just a single journal, to have a community, to have together the codes, the paper, the reviews, the comments, in order to have also something which lives beyond the few days of social media and in some cases press outlet glory after publication, and then you are left with the label. Say, okay, I publish in the journal, and so maybe I will have more chances of being invited to talk at this university or that other, because it's easier to see. But on the other hand, there are so many other metrics, and especially when it comes to evaluate the work of others through your own work. So whether you use one tool, or whether you use some theory, whether you get an idea even from a paper which comes from a different discipline. So this is also another thing. Sometimes we are stuck in the fashions dictated by our own subdisciplines sometimes. So I was mentioning these two things. How can I get out of this? Okay. So one thing is Papier, which is a server. So most of you know it, but I know that maybe some of you are also in a particularly early career stage like you. So this is called the Online Journal Club, if you want. It's basically one of the platforms to discuss science. So you can just search for a paper, and then you can comment on it. Now, Papier has become, for some reason, an outlet to criticize or to expose bad science, which is good on one hand, because there have been some egregious cases of super high-profile papers which contain some flaws which for some reason escaped to some reviewers, even in good faith, and then were exposed in this term. But on the other hand, if the first thing one thinks when say, okay, your paper is a comment of Papier, I say, shit, I screwed. On the other hand, it should be used also for constructive reviews or for any type of review. So all of us, we read the papers. Among the papers that we read, some of them are preprints, some of them are already published and so. And I hope we all have an opinion on this paper. The opinion can also be partial, can also be related to one single figure, one single analysis, or just, I don't know, the title is slightly misleading, or you could apply this to something else. But now I don't have the resources or time or whatever to do it. All those things, it really takes a negligible amount of time. Whenever you think something about it on a paper, good things, bad things, neutral things, minor suggestions on changing the color scale or whatever, go to Papier and leave a tiny comment. It could end in the oblivion or not. In the best case scenario, will be picked up by the authors, will be picked up by someone else. We say, ah, cool, this person suggested that this framework could be used in another setting. Now I don't have the time, but maybe my lab mate has the time. Why don't we do it? One reviewer, one editor could pick up some reviews from there and simply provide better reviews, or having less hard time finding reviewers for a paper, and so on. Once things happen, are then impossible to stop. But there must be a critical mass for that. And then another one is a Papier. Now I can not move the mouse anymore because it's too high. I don't even know where it is actually. Okay. So, sorry, it's not Papier. It's called the Publons. It's a website in which your activity as a reviewer or as an editor can be recognized. So, whenever you now more and more journals are adopting an automatic recognition of your review. On the other hand, you can just forward your acknowledgement of review to them, and then you will have your profiles with all the reviews, and then you can decide whether to make your review public. Unfortunately, the choice of making the review public is still to the journal. So I can choose to make my review public on Publons, but if the journal doesn't agree, then it will not become public, unless it's already public in websites such as Papier. So that's why it's important to use all the potentiality of all of this. So Publons is mainly for recognition, both, I mean, if I have to start a new journal from scratch, and if I want to find some nice reviewer or some nice editor, I would like to start from here. I mean, in my daily work as an editor, I most of the time go either to the comments on the bioarchive or to Publons, and I see, well, okay, this is someone who reviews quite a lot, who seems quite keen of doing it, or seems to have an opinion, at least on this aspect of a paper. It's really much better. If only could be organized towards a common goal and show that we can self-organize somehow. Okay, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one thought actually when I see all this. When does this stop, this whole process? Because now I'm maybe a bit old-fashioned, but I like to print a paper, sit down with a pencil and note some things. But now you have Publons, you have to check the reviews, you have to go to GitHub to see whether there are updates. You have maybe a new view on something, but there's, to my view, now it seems like there's no final product. Like, when is the paper finalized or locked?
This is you to decide. I mean, you can go to this platform, you can print a screenshot and say, "Oh, I'm old-fashioned."
No, but
have
I
my
mean,
paper." So
you get an information overload. You get continuously new views and new. Do you see my point?
yeah, but I mean, I don't think you consider any piece of your research final. I mean, I agree that a paper itself should be self-contained, should contain a story, and eventually you should stop somehow, because of course, I mean, if you want to improve or and to find flows and correct them or so, then you never end. But we should embrace the fact that something never ends. Then there are some units. I mean, that's why, for example, Publons. The name of Publons comes from the fact of that a Publon was defined as a single publishable unit, if you want. So, what is this? So either you say, okay, there is my paper, there is my science, there is my lab, but if you look at the bigger picture, there is no single unit. I mean, it's a matter of resolution. I mean, we have the same in neuroimaging. You want to stop at the voxel, you want to stop at the neuron, or something. So I think that it's important as scientists that we take care of communicating our science. So it should not only, so it should be communicated to our peers, should be communicated to the layman, should be communicated to the stakeholders. That's why in that platform thing, it's also important to have a specialization of journals. And also, I think within the university, we should have a specialization of people who are very good in software, people who are very good at designing experiments, people who are very good at mentoring, teaching, and people who are very good at storytelling. I mean, storytelling sometimes now is seen as a bad thing. So, well, okay, you make a nice story, so your paper is accepted in that journal rather than in the other one. It's not necessarily a bad thing. The thing is that science is a continuum. So, I mean, we should be a bit more Heraclitean than Pythagoreans. But on the other hand, at a certain point, we should stop even for our life. I mean,
yeah, maybe my question is more like, it used to be like a paper is a coherent story, like you said, but now if you have all these breadcrumbs and small things added to it, it can become incoherent. That's my...
yeah, I mean, there is also another thing, that a paper, more dangerously, was seen as a final thing. Say, it's published, it's there, it cannot be criticized, it cannot be falsified anymore. So I think that we can still keep something in terms of, okay, this is the story of this piece of work, but of course, if the premises changes or if the methods change, then we should embrace the fact that also what we thought as a final product can be not final anymore.
Yeah, thank you once again.